Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey everybody. Today I wanted to make a little shorty episode about a topic that has been on my mind because it has come up with two different clients recently. And that is feeling held by the world. So today I want to start off by talking about what I mean when I talk about the feeling of being held by the world. I'll use a client example to do that. Then I'm going to talk about why this feeling might be something that you want to cultivate. And then I'm going to finish off with a little mini discussion about how you might go about doing that, about how you might go about feeling more held by the world. So let's do it. So first of all, as I said, what do I mean when I talk about this feeling of feeling held by the world? So to me, the feeling of being held by the world means that you feel that you are supported on a felt level, like something or some people or force or many things are holding you. They're holding you together in this life. The opposite of feeling held by the world would be that you feel like nothing is holding you, that you're floating or you're thrashing around and there's nothing to hold on to you. As you can imagine, that can feel really tiring or stressful or disorienting. And to be clear, I didn't come up with this concept. I first heard of it from James Flaherty, who founded New Ventures West, which is where I trained to be a coach. I think it's from his book. He has a book called Coaching, Evoking Excellence in Others, but I'm not positive on that, but I'm pretty sure that I got it from him. So this is a bit of an abstract concept. So I wanted to share a client example of a client I recently talked to about this idea to make it a little bit more specific. So this client is in her late 40s. She's been quite successful in not one, but two different career paths. And she came to me for a whole hodgepodge of reasons, as many of my clients do. So work was really stressful for her. She wasn't sure if she needed to show up differently to work or if she just needed to leave. And if she did leave, what would be next? And she had a bunch of other things in her heart too. She wasn't feeling as nourished by some of the friendships in her life as she wanted. She wasn't feeling like some of them, she wasn't sure if she even kind of like knew what she liked to do anymore. So part of my job is to help my clients define the problem more clearly than they could on their own. So together, we identified early on that we'd be working on all those things that I just listed, that we'd be working on career and stress and friendships and figuring out what she actually liked. But typically, as I'm doing this intake process, this sort of definition process, as I'm figuring out what we want to be targeting for them, I'm also trying to sense beneath the more concrete stuff. Like, is there any underlying feeling that we want to work on to cultivate for them? Because if there is, then I want at least part of our work to be cultivating that feeling directly, in addition to all the other, perhaps more concrete stuff we've identified. And my sense was for that client that her life just kind of felt like nothing was holding her. Nothing had her. And on some level, she did have a fair amount that was holding her. You could make the argument that she did, right? She had a fairly strong marriage. She had a certain amount of financial security and her health and many other things. But my sense was that she felt like not enough was holding her underneath it all. And that's not to criticize her, because how we feel really matters. How we feel is how we experience the world. So I brought that up to her and I said, as I feel into you, my sense is that you might not feel like you're being held by the world enough. And if you could see me, if you could imagine me through this podcasting world, you'd see that even as I say that, my hands are kind of splayed out like I'm holding this big vase, something that has some heft to it, but I'm also kind of relaxed. That's the way that I'm holding this. And that's the way I'm communicating what being held by the world might feel like. And as soon as I said that to her, her shoulders just kind of relaxed and she took a big breath and she was like, yes, that is how I feel. I do not feel held by the world right now. And like I said a moment ago, when you don't feel held by the world, you kind of feel like you're just thrashing around in space. It all feels very tiring, very disorienting. And it's a felt experience. It's not intellectual. It's a felt sense. But I think naming it, even just naming, I don't feel held, can be a really moving experience. So that's just a little bit about what feeling held by the world is and what it can feel like to not feel held by the world. There's two reasons why I love this concept. The first one is that so often, so many of us are focused on the more tangible, maybe more specific things we need to work on in our lives. Like, oh my gosh, I know that I need to be more productive. I need to finish this project. I need to start doing regular workouts. I need to call my friends more. And all of that, it may be true, right? All of that may be true. It may absolutely be worth your time and attention. But it may also be true that the reason why you want to feel more productive or connected to friends or active is so that you can feel held by the world. Like you're doing all of those things on some level to just feel held. And so why don't we cut out the middleman? Why don't we just target that feeling directly? Even as I talk about that, my shoulders relax. I can feel my chest relax. You know, when the world has got us, we can kind of relax into it all. And so targeting that feeling directly can be really impactful. That's one reason I love this concept. And the second reason why I love this concept is that so often humans and your human challenges are kind of like these knotted balls of yarn. Talked about this before in some other podcasts. And many of my clients, by the time they come to me, they've been pulling on the same freaking spot in that knot for months and months and sometimes years or decades. And it can be really impactful to say, you know what? Let's just leave that spot for a while. Let's go over here to the whole other side of the ball of yarn where you weren't even looking. And let's loosen things over here. And you may find that everything over there, everything you've been working on for so long, is way easier once we've loosened some new stuff up. I mean, if you've ever tried to loosen knot before, you know how that is. If you loosen it over here, if you go back over there, it's going to be looser. And I find that to, in general, be quite true for my clients. Sometimes when we focus on feeling held by the world, then when we go back to trying to feel more productive or connected to friends or active or whatever we're trying to do, it becomes a lot easier. So with that in mind, maybe I've sold you. If you're like, yeah, I'd like to feel this way too, Katie. How do you go about feeling more held by the world if you don't feel that way now as much as you'd like? So my first suggestion, and the thing that I offered both of those clients who I discussed this with lately, is that you start by focusing on all of the ways that you are currently already being held by the world. I'm going to say that again. You start by focusing on all of the ways that you are currently already being held by the world. So partially, I start with this because people who don't feel held by the world often don't have a huge surplus of time and energy. So I don't want to give you new things to do to feel held if I don't have to. I want you to just start by noticing. So that's the first reason. And the second reason I start with that is because I guarantee you the world is already holding you. When you go to the grocery store and the cashier checks you out, that cashier is holding you. When you go to the sandwich place and they make you a sandwich, the person who made your sandwich is holding you. And if you want to really get into it, there's a whole legion of folks who are holding you with even just that sandwich. The folks who picked the wheat, who ground the flour, who baked it into the bread of your sandwich. There's a whole army of folks holding you with just that sandwich. And if you are someone who wants to take this even further, I'm going to offer you a little personal story. A little while ago, I was walking and talking to my friend Sarah on the phone, and I was talking about this idea of being held by the world. And she said to me, oh yeah, I remind myself all the time that the trees are holding me. Oh, And I had never thought of it, but when she said it, I could feel it in my body, this sense of relaxation, because as I looked up on the phone with her, I had this like felt experience that, yeah, the trees are holding me in this space. I don't mean that literally. They didn't have arms and hugging me, but they were holding me in this world, in this physical space that we share. I will say many of my clients find it easier to think about people who are holding them rather than trees or objects like roads or houses or beds, but you'll do what resonates with you. If it's people that lands with you more, maybe it's the crossing guard at your kid's school. Maybe it's the Amazon delivery person who drops off your package. Maybe it's the colleague who writes their email in a particularly thorough or conscientious way today. They are all holding you in this world. And when you notice that you are being held, simply say to yourself inside of your own head, this person or this thing, it's holding me right now. I am being held by the world right now. I'll say that again. Just say to yourself, this person or this thing, it's holding me right now. I am being held by the world right now. And try to notice that at least a couple of times a day. I've recommended this practice to 2 different clients recently, including the client I talked about at the beginning of this episode. And they both came back to me and they said, hey, Katie, it felt so good to realize how much the world was holding me. It's subtle, but it's nice. It feels good to be held. It feels good to feel held by the world. So I offer you that little idea this week, my friends. I'm rooting for you. Take care. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.